Good morning and welcome to today's webinar, Integration that Outperforms, Integrating JD Edwards and Magento e-commerce. My name is Glenn Johnson. I'm a Senior Vice President here at Magic Software Enterprises in the Americas, and I'm joined today by Ryan Beck, a Senior Consultant with Magic Software. Welcome, Ryan.
Thank you, Glenn.
And we look forward to sharing with you today on today's topic. JD Edwards users are very involved in many instances in utilizing e-commerce. And so Magento e-commerce is a great example of an e-commerce platform from which we can discuss the broader topic of e-commerce integration, but it's also a very specific system that we'll talk about some of its details and integration related to Magento itself in our presentation. A couple of housekeeping items on today's webinar related to the chat and the question box. You may enter your questions either into the chat or the question box. The chat box is private, and the question box posts the questions to everyone, so take your pick of those two methods. But go ahead and enter those questions. When we complete our formal presentation, we'll go ahead and try to get to as many of those questions as possible before we conclude today's broadcast. So thanks again for joining us. We look forward to learning more from each of you individually about your actual situation in your IT departments and in your use of JD Edwards and Magento or whatever e-commerce platform it is that you currently are employing, and look forward to helping you in whatever way we can. So let's go ahead and get started. We're going to talk about the changing e-commerce landscape, some of the scalability issues related to e-commerce, e-commerce integration considerations as they relate to Magento, and of course ERP integration considerations as they relate to JD Edwards. And then we'll be looking at a demonstration of the capabilities of the Magic XPI integration platform in a broader sense across all of what's possible there. So that change in e-commerce landscape causes us to ask the question, you know, what's going on? What are the changes? What are the trends that are taking place this year in 2014 and perhaps beyond? And one of the obvious changes is simply the growth in e-commerce. The non-travel e-commerce sector is nearing $300 billion in 2014, according to eMarketer. By 2017, should reach some $434 billion. And of course, if you add in travel, it's an even larger economy. But this is an economy, obviously, that just simply cannot be ignored by business anymore. And online sales in e-commerce are going into a number of different verticals with specialized e-commerce sites as well as the generalist sites. And your business obviously wants to take advantage of that, either in direct consumer or in e-commerce for your trading partners. So when you're utilizing Magento, there are going to be a number of trends that are taking place in e-commerce generally that you want to consider. First of all, as we've discussed, this is just dynamic growth in web commerce, but also the growth in mobile commerce and some of these conceptual shifts that are developing trends in the areas of local commerce, social commerce, and daily commerce. So let's take a look at those. The explosion in mobile commerce is one that suggests that consumers are really beyond the experimental phase in many instances. Many consumers have multiple and repeat purchase histories that suggest that they are long-term committed mobile shoppers. And some are still in the early experimental phase. Some have not yet made their first purchase in certain types of purchase categories. But despite all that, it's suggested that nearly half of all mobile users have purchased, you know, some kind of digital product. And that's the first step, just getting them to transact e-commerce. And digital products are obviously the most obvious because you use them in conjunction with the device. But 1 in 4, 25% of the market has purchased things like clothing, nothing to do with the device itself, just using it for that shopping experience. And so we're seeing these various segments grow as consumers are using those mobile devices more and more for their various types of commerce. Now, the other really interesting dimension is how the smartphone and the tablet are changing the way that online commerce is taking place and integrating in many respects and changing the way that brick and mortar retail takes place. And so this term local commerce kind of brings all of that together, and it's describing this transition from online to offline purchases, which are triggered by things like buy in store buttons. So someone starts online in this instance and then ends up saying, oh, I want to pick that up in a local retail location because I want that instant gratification of getting the product today. I can see that it's nearby. And so buy in store, as many of you already know, is really impacting business processes because it's not just now a matter of online order fulfillment, but often it involves coordinating with all of one's retail locations for will call type situations in store as well. In addition to that, there's this whole idea of what happens when the consumer is in the retail environment. They start using their mobile phone to search and do comparison shopping and get information about products and all of that. And that is, of course, the moment at which, from a marketing standpoint, you have an advantage if you can put special offers and your own information and your own comparisons in front of those consumers based on their geolocation and based on the sites that they or search engines they might be using. You have the opportunity, of course, to position your advertising and your messaging in front of those consumers. So local commerce is huge. A completely different dimension from the geolocation question is the social connections of your potential consumer. And social commerce is all about leveraging tactics that utilize the social sites and the social interaction and communication methodologies that are out there in order to try to drive some type of consumer behavior. And so these tactics that are available on the major sites like Facebook and LinkedIn and Twitter and Google Plus and Pinterest, YouTube, and so on are all ones that are very obvious. And then there are a number of less well-known sites, and the tactic can be either direct or indirect. It could be simply more of a marketing and demand generation type of activity that's taking place, or it could be direct purchase capabilities from within links that are on these sites. So there's if you will, the hard sell and the soft sell of social commerce tactics. And in addition, of course, you can again leverage special offers in these situations in order to create and drive demand towards your e-commerce platforms. So IT departments have to prepare for all of that. The reason we bring it up is not just to talk about the interesting dimensions of local commerce and social commerce and the next subject, daily commerce, but to say really that IT departments need to find a way to integrate to these various environments and bring that information across in whatever fashion is necessary. That may be going into a CRM profile for that customer, a shopper's profile, an online buying profile in the e-commerce platform. It might also need to be informed, the offer might need to be informed by available inventory information, which is in a back-end system in ERP, in warehouse management, and so on. So these are all key considerations that as you analyze your business processes and just how far you want to leverage tactics in the area of social commerce and how sophisticated you want those tactics to be, then you need to consider how to handle that integration. And there's no area where there seems to be more craziness maybe than the daily deal, where there's so many businesses and websites and social sites that have emerged on this idea of the Groupon, of course, and Living Social are the ones that most people are familiar with, but there are many, many others. Some have come and gone, but we suspect that consolidation will continue here. Nevertheless, there are a large number of APIs that one can take advantage of, and the IT department that has a systematic way of dealing with those APIs has a great advantage over the IT department that's constantly, responding to this as if it should be a programming project. It should not be a programming project in order to adapt your e-commerce environment to the APIs that are out there. And so learning how to best deal with this sophistication is I think, going to be very important going forward for a lot of organizations. Assuming their success in all of what you're doing in the e-commerce area, scalability is very important. You have to be prepared in advance for what can happen next. And the factors that are impacting e-commerce scalability are something that you need to look at. First of all, let's understand that e-commerce is about buying and selling products through various online environments and techniques. And you have to be prepared for the volume that can occur, or you could lose your buying and selling opportunities. You could literally lose business. You have to look at the seasonal spikes, the holiday seasons, the Black Fridays, the Cyber Mondays, the Boxing Day, all of those, high demand days when there's going to be more activity, perhaps either in terms of local commerce, social commerce, or daily commerce, or more traditional e-commerce. And the day that the daily commerce deal goes out, you're going to have a spike, right? You need to be prepared for that. You need to understand, can we deal with this kind of demand? And so there are consequences if you're not prepared, up to, including, total system failure, but delays, errors in processing, and so on are also part of that picture. So how do we get to scalability? Well, e-commerce platforms typically, separate the two obvious areas, the web interface and the back-end database. And that's a start, for a moderate scale. That's normally, going to provide us with some flexibility. Just, okay, let's scale up our database, let's scale up our web server, and for moderate demand, that can be enough. But there's also the question of what happens on the back end in terms of the ERP integration. And here the scalability gets trickier because e-commerce platforms are not running the enterprise by themselves, obviously. The ERP system, as well as the other enterprise systems in your environment, are often integrated with e-commerce, and you're going to have things like financial transactions, customer records, product master data, supplier management processes, and so on that are being integrated. And those each have scalability questions around them that will cause you to want to optimize those business processes and environments. Now, Magento, of course, is an e-commerce platform that is very popular. It's one of the leaders. It's flexible. It's scalable. And with 150,000 e-commerce sites out there, that it has been put to the test, including by some pretty major brands that are among their customer base. So with that consideration, we need to really look specifically at Magento now, and you can either consider this an example, or this may actually be the system that you're using or considering using. And so it's important to take a look at how you can really scale up your Magento environment. So first of all, it's choosing which Magento edition. Magento Enterprise is where you want to be for scalability. It's designed for the best performance, and you can optimize the infrastructure around it. Then on the back end, you're going to want to look at, how can you achieve real-time integration with a scalable integration platform so that you're not programming it yourself with point-to-point integration that really lacks the scalability that you need. Now, the enterprise edition of Magento is designed for high performance and scalability. They talk about the enterprise class features that are part of that platform. The flexibility, you can actually do a lot on the marketing side to help drive the demand and increase the need for that scale. But it also includes an API that has flexibility to create some very custom experiences for your shoppers. It has mobile shopping components to it, and it allows you to connect, through that API to whatever it is consuming or communicating with that API. So that could be a point-to-point program that you write, but as we said, there's serious scalability issues there as well as maintenance issues. Or it can be through an integration platform such as Magic XPI that's leveraging that API in order to really maximize the efficient execution of those business processes across a true platform environment. And we'll talk about some of those unique characteristics of Magic XPI in a moment. But first, in terms of e-commerce scalability, the question is, well, how scalable do we need to be? And there's no easy answer to that because there are a number of factors that you can measure in order to determine the type of throughput and volume that is to be expected. The size of your catalog makes a difference. The average browsing time per user, the number of visitors per day, the peak number of visitors, the number of orders, the peak number of orders, what times a day do those orders occur. And when you look at that, you have to consider a normal week. You have to consider your worst day ever, and which is your best day ever. That's the holiday rush, and you want that, of course. And then the number of concurrent administrative users that are on the system, the number of SKUs that are there, the number of data fields that are tracked for your product, size, color, et cetera, all the various characteristics that might be organized in a structured data format as opposed to simply the unstructured description, text data, and so on, the blobs of information, picture data, et cetera, et cetera. And so you should also take a look at categories. How do we categorize this information? Are we utilizing ability to keep track of by brand? Are we keeping track by product categories, et cetera? So those scalability factors will all be analyzed by the business analyst, and then, in essence, an estimate of the required scalability is derived at. But of course, can be a fairly speculative environment because it depends in many respects on demand. And demand forecasting is a tricky, economic and business question, not simply a technical question, of course. Now, the architecture for scalability means that for many organizations, brings up the whole specter of security in addition to scalability. So the security of those environments is usually accomplished by putting the integration piece behind the firewall. The integration architecture usually sits behind a firewall so that you have maximum control over what's going on from a security standpoint with that enterprise data. You often have separate servers for for the web server, the database, as we suggested. Payment processing will often have its own server environment. The integration environment will often have its own server, depending upon scale, and that's certainly best practice. For maximum elastic scalability and high availability, then you're going to want to look at something that goes beyond just traditional architecture. And so when you're looking for high reliability, for transactional integrity, then your integration architecture needs to use something that's truly elastic in terms of its scalability, which I would suggest is an in-memory computing approach, such as an in-memory data grid. Now, when we look on the other side of the equation, the ERP system itself, well, JD Edwards ERP integration is accomplished through APIs that are provided by Oracle. Now, Oracle is the manufacturer. The JD Edwards is the brand of ERP. There are companion brands, PeopleSoft, and Business Suite, that come from Oracle. And of course, it is not a single piece of software. There are numerous capabilities within JD Edwards that might cause you to have different modules in place, all of which is very normal. And yet, through API capabilities, through business functions, which are using dynamic Java connectors in many instances, and some various techniques that are a little different from what people are used to in the e-commerce world. E-commerce is typically driven by web service standards, and when you start looking at ERP systems, it's a real mixed bag of often flat file integration, Java integration, some web services integration, and so the fact that ERP has been around quite a bit longer, wasn't initially in many instances web-based, and causes those APIs to have some, if you'll excuse the expression, some funkiness to them. There are a variety of different techniques that are required. Well, Magic XPI allows you to connect front office and back office for two-way information exchange. Things like pushing the inventory data to the website, order information being pushed to JDE, credit card processing, bidirectional address book updates, and you have, depending upon your version of JD Edwards Enterprise One or JD Edwards World, a variety of different integration capabilities, because those have changed over time, and with different versions come different capabilities. But in general, Enterprise One has business functions, and when we look at World, there's both processes or services as well as Z-tables. Z-tables are also, or Z-processes are available in Enterprise One as well, but you have a little more flexibility or choice in most Enterprise One environments when it comes to integration than you do in most World environments. However, the good news is that with Magic XPI, you do have an Oracle-validated integration solution for JD Edwards World, which is certification, if you will, process that Oracle provides, and also Oracle-validated integration for Enterprise One are both provided by Magic XPI. So you know that the integration that's going in is utilizing approved methods. That's what Oracle is basically testing for. So those approved integration approaches are taking place, and you don't have to worry about avoiding your support and that type of thing. Well, you could use Z-file processes, but there are some limitations to Z-table file structure. It's not always a solution. Exception files in Z-processes are very difficult to deal with. If you're just doing it yourself, there's lots of manual reconciliation and error correction that needs to take place. It's a batch process, and so these can often be out of sync with what's going on in the business, particularly in the world of e-commerce. You can have day-old information if you're running that batch on a daily basis, or even worse, if the administrator's out with a cold and they don't run the batch that day, then you could have 2-day-old information, etc. So these batch processes are difficult to administer, and even when you're setting them on a schedule, there's a lot of staff time consumed for management of those exceptions. So you want to find automated ways to deal not only with the processing of the information itself and the transactions in a real-time or near real-time solution, but also in the processing and management of the exceptions, so that when you get errors, when you get exceptions, you have flows that are designed specifically to deal with those environments. Magic XPI also improves processes. It's going to overcome the limits of these Z-table file structures so that when other data needs to be involved that's outside of the Z-table file structure, Magic XPI uses business functions and the database is accessed on the back end through those business functions. So the business functions are providing that kind of access. You can manage the exceptions automatically, as I suggested, and this is going to allow you to create a customized business process that maybe fixes the bad data and routes the exceptions, the workflow for those exceptions, so that it's handled automatically based on your business rules. And so you're going to get, instead of batch, near real-time business processes with Magic XPI, where basically the real-time experience is broken up into a series of short asynchronous bursts, so that as the events are triggered, then an interaction occurs, and that is going to create that real-time feel for that business process. Although technically we don't keep the thread open necessarily to call it a truly synchronous exchange of information from the end user perspective. That's what they obtain. And so administration and monitoring is much better as well, because it becomes kind of a hands-free set it, forget it. You have an integration monitor that's looking at every single transaction. You can log information related to that transaction. In fact, you can create attachments, attach that so that the log file contains the transacted data as an attachment. You can look at dashboard views where you can see how the processes are performing. What is the latency? How many errors are there? What is the average time per process, and so on. And so you can really build out that Magic XPI monitor with those that dashboard information as well as the log information in order to deal with the scalability challenges that might be coming. And the other nice thing is that Magic XPI integration survives system changes, so that as you upgrade your version of JD Edwards, even when that back-end ERP system is upgraded, the nice thing is because you're utilizing a loosely coupled approach to integration, it's not hard-coded, it's not hard-coded point-to-point integration, then it simply needs to be told, where is the new JD Edwards system? It used to be, 7.3, where is 9.1? And you point it to 9.1, and suddenly it starts utilizing the API of the new system, but the business process can be maintained. So that's one of the great things. We have a number of examples of customers who have done that. They've literally been able to get their integration back up and running within a matter of minutes when they upgraded from one version of JD Edwards to the other, because all they had to do was basically change the topological information pointing to the IP address of the new system. Very powerful. So Magic XPI is allowing you to deal with the other stuff that's out there outside of JD Edwards, and the real power of an integration system is in dealing with all of that third-party software, with all the web integration that needs to take place. And there's no need to change your current applications or websites with this. It's utilizing what's there, including if you happen to be running in the System I or AS400 environment. It will take advantage of user space and data queue and the principal and CL commands and program calls, and of course the database structure of DB2400. So these are unique System I capabilities. So because Magic XPI is cross-platform, it doesn't matter if you're running in Linux, if you're running in IBMI, if you're running in Windows, if you're running in Unix language. It has the capabilities built in to deal with the differences of these systems and automate the interaction with these capabilities, and that's very powerful. If you can call one of these JD Edwards RPG programs, for example, and get a result from that, pass parameters back and forth, which you can with Magic XPI, that puts you in charge without having to write code, and that's really the whole idea behind it, giving you surface-oriented architecture. It sounded like I said surface. But when you get SOA capabilities through either web services or other types of architecture, that becomes powerful because in an XPI integration platform environment, you can do that without having to write code. Let's look at a quick example of where a customer had J.D. Edwards. This is Cleveland Golf. They had a green screen interface, so obviously they were running J.D. Edwards World. And it's not something that a lot of salespeople in today's modern world are really eager to interact with, as one can imagine. So they knew that they needed to modernize the interfaces. Even though they had a very sophisticated back-end system, they needed to modernize the interfaces that some of their employees and users were working with. And so Magic XPI is able to bridge a solution that in this case involves iPads to J.D. Edwards, which is running on an IBM I, or the old AS400 as many people still call it. And it is also providing them with native connectivity to their e-commerce platform. And of course, you can integrate with other smartphone and tablet environments as well with Magic's enterprise mobility solution. So the application that they created was called IREP at Cleveland Golf, and it allowed them to have an iPad be in a retail environment, talk to the store manager, enter the order, and then do that based on available inventory, available current product offerings that are being updated and displayed on that iPad. A very nice user interface. And so this, what do we mean when we said consumerization of IT, where it's really that transition from that green screen to a nice interface like the kinds that we're seeing here, where today people are so impacted by the types of online consumer experiences that they have, either through mobile devices or websites, that there's an expectation of business users to be able to interact in this fashion with business-related systems. And so this is a sales order entry system for the salesperson who's got a tablet, and they're standing in front of the customer, and they're talking to the customer, and they're saying, you know, how many drivers do you guys want to stock? You know, have you heard about our new Strixon balls? You know, you really ought to add some caps to this order today. These are really popular in a lot of the stores, you know, that we've been in. And so, you know, you're doing your cross-selling, you're upselling in a visually beautiful environment, and you're taking care of it on the spot in the store, you know, maybe right in the aisle where the inventory deficiency is visible to that interaction. So e-commerce is taking on a number of different meanings and dimensions, and being able to integrate that to those back-end systems so that those orders just get processed automatically is very powerful. And Cleveland Golf is just a great example of how an application can be created on a mobile device, whether it's a smartphone or a tablet, where integration can take place between your ERP system, J.D. Edwards in this case, and your e-commerce platform and the mobile environment, so that you have truly you know, well-designed business processes. And the great thing about Magic XPI, which we're going to take a look at now in the demonstration, is that you know, it's a visual drag, drop, and configure approach with data mapping capabilities and a scalable integration architecture based on the ability to work with an in-memory data grid so that you have co-location of memory and processing. You have dynamic scaling. This is, I think, truly a great opportunity for those of you who are on the call now to actually see it. So what I'm going to do is stop with the formal presentation and go to the demonstration here with Ryan. So Got to make sure I have Ryan selected. I do, and that means I can actually make Ryan the presenter, and he'll be able to share his desktop. So Ryan, it looks like you have control now. You want to go ahead and share your desktop with us so we can see your demonstration?
All right, let's go ahead and get that set up.
Awesome. Take it away, Ryan.
All right, thank you, Len. So what I'm going to do is, using Magento, we're going to go ahead and show how we can integrate the different applications and see what that looks like. So, and then when we're done, we're going to connect it to JD Edwards and look at how easily we can move that data into JD Edwards E1. So just starting right now, I've got like any person that just installed Magento, I've got a simple shopping cart here with some items in it. And I can log into the administration panel. So I'll go ahead and get it signed into that. And so, people can come and buy stuff from me, which is nice. So let's just pretend that we are a customer at this point. And what's going to happen is when someone places an order, we're going to go ahead and automatically move that into the ERP system. Now, in this case, actually, I've got it connected to SAP Business One. But we'll see what that does, and then we're going to switch it to use JD Edwards instead. So I'm going to go ahead and grab some items that I want to buy. This looks nice. And I don't know, what else do we want? Let's go ahead and grab something really expensive. So why not? Here we go. Add to cart. And of course, I want like 3 of these and 2 of these. So 11,000 bucks looks good. Let's go ahead and proceed to checkout. And I'm just going to go ahead and go as a guest. So let's see. Do I have autofill maybe? What's our address here? Close enough. Okay, so there's my order, and what I want to do now is go ahead and see what happens when I submit it. So if I go ahead and say ship to this address and pay the 25 bucks shipping, okay, I think for what I'm paying I would not have to do that, but that's all right. Okay, there we go. I'm going to submit this order. After I do, I'm going to place the order. I'm going to switch over and look at it on the administration panel. So here I'm now, I submitted the order as a user. I came in to look at it as an administrator. And right now the order shows up as pending. In other words, it's an incoming order. Well, it doesn't. We don't want to just stop here. So what's automatically happening in the background is Magic XPI has found that this order exists, and it's going to launch what's called a flow to process it. So go ahead and fulfill it. And you'll see that here at about 11:37 local time here, the order came in as pending. Well, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to refresh my screen. And if everything's happened correctly, you'll see that shortly after the order came in, we actually had a couple things that happened. First off, you'll see here that there is something was created in Salesforce. So actually, we pushed the new customer out to Salesforce to maybe contact them and see if they want to purchase anything else in the future. But also, then we also created the order in our SAP system. So we see now order number 271 is created in SAP, and I can log into SAP and look at it. So we can do that real quick. So it's just basically creating a real-time seamless integration between two applications. So then here's the order that I placed on the website, just brought into the SAP system, with the right total and the right items and everything. Got the same address I put in on the website. So really just instantaneous ability to bring it back into somewhere where it can be fulfilled. Now, what if I wanted to now steer this a different way? What if we wanted to leave the Magento connection, but now we want to push it over to JD Edwards? So how would I go about that? So I'm going to go ahead and go a little bit behind the covers here and show you what's going on behind the curtain in Magic XPI. So this is right now the development studio. It's a visual design environment where we create flows and integrations like the one you just saw. And as you can see, it's made up of a lot of little icons that look like this. There's these little pictures here that are in squares that do things with our data. So for instance, like there's components that are reading databases. There's components that are talking to ERP systems and Salesforce. And what we want to do is basically just add on to this and get it to do something in addition to what it's already doing. So right now we've got a customer being created here in SAP, and we see our mappings. They would go from the left side, which is our web services that came from Magento, and the right side is our probably our SAP business partner. So they have mappings that go across that just basically define the relationship between the two sides. So if we wanted to go ahead and modify this and say, okay, well, let's go ahead and stick this field is important from Magento, let's plug that into SAP there. We just do that. We can visually map it across just quite easily like that. So in doing this, we just basically are defining how we want it to show up in SAP. Well, let's now switch gears and let's do the same thing with going to JD instead, right? So let's go ahead and look at what it takes to make that happen. Well, all you do is go over here to my left side here where I have this sort of what I call the palette. It's a repository of components. And these are all the components that are available in Magic XPI. There's like over 60 of them. And there's a lot of generic ones that can go into really any application, which we'll talk about a little bit, like HTTP and FTP. But actually what I'm interested in the moment right now is our JD Edwards component. It is designed to be able to call E1 anywhere from version like 8.10 all the way up to the newest version 9.1 and call business functions. So what happens is we basically are able to log into JD Edwards and use their API so that we get the security model and the data validation of the business functions, but we can get real-time sync data all the way back into the real internal tables of JD Edwards. So we don't have to do any weird, we don't have to do any Z tables, we don't have to worry about batch programs running, we don't have to do hard inserts on the database. We do it in the correct way so that we basically maintain the integrity of the data, but get real-time integration out of it. So I'm going to go ahead and drag the E1 component over. So let's just say what happens if maybe if the customer fails to create in SAP, we'll go and make it go to JD Edwards. Or I can make it go to the other side where it would do both. It's really just a matter of how you design your flow. It's all visual, like where you place the components, decide when they run, which order, and whether or not they run. And I'm just going to go ahead and configure this. So I'm going to right-click it and hit Configuration. And this window pops up that says, all right, what do you want to do in JDE? Well, there's a couple ways I can find out about what business functions exist in JDE. The cool thing is when I hit this button, it's actually going to log into my JD Edwards environment and find out what all business functions I have. So if I wanted to, say, work with a sales order, I could go edit a sales order. I could go create one if I want to make a new one. All the business functions basically exist. You just need to just go in and grab them, and it discovers what they are. The nice thing about that is if you wrote a new one, it would just show up in here. So it's doing service discovery. It doesn't have built-in support for any specific function. It basically can use any business function that exists on your platform. Other things I can do, instead of searching by hierarchy like this, is I can actually search by name. So if I want to look for anything to work with the address book, I'm just going to do a search for the address book master business function that I want. And here it is right here. So I'm going to choose this guy, and this is going to allow me to add the customer to JD Edwards. So I'll hit select and hit OK. And then hit the mappings, and I'll look at the data that's coming from JD, that's allowed to go to JD. So I can see that there's some fields like the business unit, the address line number. The great thing about this when you're using business functions is you don't see the column names like you would if you were looking into a Z table. You actually see the real English name. So it says SZ long address number, not not AN whatever, and then some abbreviation. It actually shows me what all the fields are. So I need to put something over on the left side, and there's a lot of things we can put over on the left side. We can query from a database if we want to bring in a database source. I can use a flat file, so if I had a comma, delimited, or positional file or something like that, I can map it over and bring it in. But what we want to do is we want to be able to pull the data from Magento. So Magento, of course, is basically a web service that we have. And data comes out of it from XML, and we're able to, our web service component can actually automatically read it and understand how to parse the XML that comes out of Magento. So we've got our schema that says how to read orders. So if I want to look at what orders are coming out of JD, I might want to just grab the customer ID. So let's see, maybe we want to put the customer ID over here in the long address book number. Maybe we want to hard code something and say the search type is always going to be a C, so we'll always be doing a customer probably. And then just map, things like the customer name and how we want to refer to them. So there's that, and there's that. And just go ahead and go down and create our mappings. And the nice thing about this is it's very visual. So if you come back here 6 months later or 2 years later or whatever, and you need to make changes to this, you can very easily see what it's doing now. So it's not like lines and lines of code where you need to interpret it like a C program. It's basically a very visual approach to this, and allows us to more rapidly deploy a project, but also to maintain it as well. And this means that any BA that looks at this can go in here and look at what my mappings are and understand them, and see, okay, well that makes sense, or that doesn't, and see what it's doing. We can also do more instead of these one-to-one mappings. I can also do more transformations. Like say we wanted to take I don't know, just something like we want to take the first name and last name and concatenate them together. I can just take more than one and put them together like this, and we actually have a long list of expressions you can do similar to like in Excel, so I can concatenate things together. Like I can say first name and then a space and then last name, or I can do last comma first or something like that. Just use these expressions to create how you want the data to be transformed from source to destination. And then that gives us a lot of power that you would have in a scripted language, but it's totally code-free. You're just using this simple expressions just to manipulate things like that. There's actually a wide array of components that we have. So for JD Edwards, we have our E1 component that I showed you, which is using, it actually uses the XML interop interface. And then we also have the world component, which is using Z-tables, so we can connect to older versions of World, like 7.3 or 8.1, and still give them the real-time integration they want by being able to insert data into Z-tables and call RPG programs at the same time. So they get near real-time integration, even though they don't have business functions like E1 does. Other components of interest here are ones like the HTTP component. We're using HTTP to query data straight out of Magento. Magento is a e-commerce PHP-based shopping cart. There's ways to get into it. You can read the MySQL database, but that's kind of hard because it's a very normalized database. Everything's all over in many different tables. So it's easier and more, I think, robust to insulate from changes in their database if you use their web services. They have actually a couple different interfaces. They have 3 different interfaces now of web services, depending on what your favorite style is. They have a SOAP interface. They have a RESTful interface. A lot of different stuff that's available, and we're simply just using the HTTP to go into the SOAP interface right now, but they also do have a brand new RESTful interface that is there. And those are available both in the Community Edition and in the Enterprise Edition of Magento. You don't need to have, you actually the free version you download does have those web services available, and you can be off and running very quickly. Other components of interest that might come up, we actually have our data mapper, which really works with any type of database, MySQL, Microsoft SQL, Oracle, DB2, DB2 400, as well as a few others. A lot of Microsoft applications have components in here like Dynamics and Exchange, and SharePoint is a new one that we're constantly using, because really everybody has SharePoint, so there's always a way to bring that in and give some visibility to your integrations at the SharePoint level, so you can see them as a dashboard or something like that. Also, a lot of components that are, like I said, generic. So if we need to be able to work with a physical file, we can do that. If we want to work with a directory scanner, it will just watch incoming files coming in a folder. FTP servers are very common for moving around. So it really just becomes a Swiss knife of integration. Basically, anything you really need to integrate to, we have several different levels we can do it at. We may have a custom-built component that goes to that, like with a JD Edwards. We might have a web services. We might have, we can obviously talk to the database. We can work with physical files. There's always a way to communicate with just about anything, everything out there. All your applications out there have these integration hooks, and it's just a hook. That's it. That's all. It's just hanging there, waiting for something to grab onto it and tell it what to do, and orchestrate the whole integration. And that's what Magic XPI does. It doesn't just have interfaces that you can use. It actually initializes other interfaces and brings them alive. And it decides when to call JD Edwards. It decides when to call Magento. It initializes everything and makes it, and basically is essentially the orchestra master. So this is the studio. Once you design your project, this goes away. This is, you can close this. Magic XPI runs as a batch program in the background. You're running on our data grid. And then after that, we have what's called the Magic XPI monitor, which allows you to see a running server. So I can look at which projects are running and which ones are stopped. Most of them are stopped right now because I'm only doing one demo. And so the Magento project is running, and I can see how many messages it's served. I can see how long it's been running. I can see how hard it's working, and I can start it and stop it. This is sort of like the command and control here. I can turn it on and off. And I can also actually go ahead and open up the project and look at what's running through it right now. So I can see every component that's running. I can also look at just one flow, and it actually would allow me then to see data that's running through, and it could be data that happened in the past. So, for instance, if I want to see what happened at 11:39, what happened at, when this order came through, I can actually go in here and look at the XML message that ran through the server that created this customer. So I can see the XML that came through. This was after it was manipulated from a Magento XML to a SAP XML, so I can see what got sent in. That way, if there's any question about, hey, why did this field look like this, or why did someone do it that way, I don't have to rerun the transaction and then put something in debug mode to go figure out what happened. I can start the investigation right away by just looking at the data that came through in the past. So it all gets attached here in the Magic XPI monitor. I can see the response from Salesforce. So Salesforce says, yep, that got created. Cool, looks good. And then I can also see the response from SAP for the order creation. So here was our order creation with our 2 items, quantity 3, quantity 2 with prices. And this was basically, then I think we had a little bit of some shipping charges down here. I'm still not too happy about. But basically here was the order going through to SAP. So I can go back and look at all this data. I can attach it optionally or not. It doesn't need to be in there, but it is nice to be able to have, so I can go back and see what it's doing and know that everything's up and running. Glenn, do we have any questions?
Yeah, let's give folks a moment here to type in their questions into the
chat box or the questions box. Do have one to start off with. Which tools release is required to use this with E1?
There's no requirement. You do need to have JD tools installed. We have worked with everything from 8.10 all the way up to the very, very newest versions. So it's the component itself kind of insulates you from if you upgrade. So the component knows how to connect to different versions. It's just a matter of configuration to get it to connect from, say, 8.12 to 9.1, right? And so your project would not change as you upgrade from one to the other. And we don't have any requirement for tools release other than you just have it.
Okay. Another one, how much memory is needed for the in-memory data grid if you have 1,000 average typical JDE transactions per day?
Okay. Well, typically the development environment is happy with about 2 to 3 gigs of memory. For a production environment, we typically just need like 4 gigs of memory. We can use a lot more if you have higher transaction volume, but it has a very small footprint, so not a whole lot.
Okay. In the log, you mentioned attachments. Can the individual order data be logged as a separate XML per order?
Oh, sure. So in the logs here, I actually have here, let me go back. I have here order number 5015 that went through. I tested this before the demo. You can see that was about an hour ago when Glenn was talking. So I can see that order that went through. This was a little test one I ran through. And then at 11:39, I actually see the order that I placed while you guys were watching. We can see the data come through for that. So yes, absolutely.
Okay. And we have some legacy apps with data in Lotus Notes databases. Can we interact with that, or do we need to use Salesforce with this?
We do have very good support for Lotus Domino. So we have 2 components that are of interest there. One of them is not as important. The Domino component here is more for working with sending and receiving emails and working with calendar invites, basically everything in your inbox. We also have the Notes DB component, which will work with any database that runs on Notes, everywhere from, I think we support like version like 5 all the way up through 8.5. So really any version of Notes, and basically it will be able to do all your basic operations against Notes. So create, update, read, delete, anything you want to do, and we have a very great component for that as well. A lot of different Lotus Notes customers using it.
Okay, great. Well, I don't see any questions coming in, so I want to thank everyone for joining us today. Ryan, thank you very much for the demonstration. That was excellent, and I think you're very helpful, and I know that many are going to want to talk to you on a follow-up basis to see what they can do in their own environment. So thank you very much for that.
You're welcome.
And once again, thanks to everyone for joining us. We look forward to seeing you again soon on another Magic Software webinar.